Good morning, everyone. Brett Kavanaugh speaking from my chambers on what's becoming the most uncomfortable conversation I've ever had to have with the American people. So I'm sitting here this morning staring at a file that landed on my desk yesterday, a file I never should have seen, containing information that's been classified at the highest levels for over a decade. And I realize I can't stay silent anymore about something that affects the integrity of our entire system of government. We need to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, not the version you've heard in the media, not the sanitized story that's been fed to the public, but the real story, the intelligence operations story, the story that explains why powerful people are still being protected, why evidence has disappeared, and why this case represents the biggest threat to government legitimacy in modern American history. The file that changed everything. Let me start with how I learned what I'm about to tell you. 3 days ago, I'm reviewing a routine Supreme Court case involving international financial regulations when my clerk brings me a supplemental filing. Routine stuff, or so I thought, but buried in the appendix of this filing is a document that shouldn't have been there. A partially redacted intelligence assessment about financial networks used for what they call compromise operations against high-value targets. The document is from 2008, and it mentions an operation codenamed Honey Trap, involving a financier with extensive contacts in political, academic, and business circles. The financier's name is redacted, but the operational details are there. And folks, those details match exactly what we know about Jeffrey Epstein's activities. I realize immediately that this document was included by mistake. Someone in the intelligence community is trying to get information to the Supreme Court through back channels. And yesterday I found out why, the phone call. Yesterday evening, around 8 p.m., I get a call on my secure line. The voice on the other end identifies himself as a career intelligence officer who's been following my questions about the document. Justice Kavanaugh, he says, that document wasn't included by mistake. There are people in the intelligence community who believe you need to know what really happened with Epstein because cases related to this operation are going to come before your court. We arranged to meet this morning at a small coffee shop in McLean, Virginia. And what this individual tells me over the course of 3 hours fundamentally changes how I understand the Epstein case. Let me call him David, obviously not his real name, but someone who's worked in counterintelligence for over 20 years and has direct knowledge of foreign intelligence operations on American soil. The real Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, David tells me, stirring his coffee methodically, was not just a pedophile who happened to know powerful people. He was an intelligence asset running a sophisticated blackmail operation against American political and business leaders. David pulls out his tablet and shows me a timeline that I've never seen in any public reporting. Epstein's rise to wealth and prominence wasn't due to financial genius. It was due to intelligence backing. He was funded and protected because he was collecting compromising information on people who could influence American policy. The timeline shows Epstein's connections to intelligence figures going back to the early 1980s, long before he became a public figure. His mentor, Les Wexner, had extensive ties to Israeli intelligence, David explains. Wexner essentially gave Epstein his fortune and his Manhattan mansion, but he wasn't being generous. He was funding an operation. But here's the part that really gets my attention. The operation wasn't just Israeli. It was joint Israeli-American. The CIA knew what Epstein was doing, approved of what he was doing, and protected what he was doing because it served American intelligence interests. The blackmail network. David explains how the operation worked, and it's more sophisticated than anything I've seen in counterintelligence briefings. Epstein's properties weren't just locations for criminal activity, he says. They were intelligence collection sites. Every room was monitored, every conversation recorded, every activity documented. But the real genius of the operation was the networking aspect. Epstein didn't just compromise individuals. He created a network of compromised individuals who could be activated when needed. David shows me a chart that looks like a spider web. Epstein at the center, connected to politicians, judges, business leaders, academics, journalists, and foreign officials. Each person in this network could be leveraged to influence others in the network. It was a force multiplication system. For example, David continues, if you needed a favorable business regulation, you could pressure a compromised politician to pressure a compromised regulator. If you needed favorable media coverage, you could activate compromised journalists and editors. If you needed a legal ruling, you could influence compromised judges. The implications hit me like a brick wall. Are you telling me that Supreme Court cases might have been influenced by this network? David's silence tells me everything I need to know. The intelligence protection. I asked David the obvious question, if intelligence agencies knew about Epstein's activities, why didn't they stop him? Because they were using him, David replies bluntly. Epstein provided American intelligence with detailed information about foreign officials, business leaders, and politicians from dozens of countries. Every foreign leader who was compromised by Epstein was essentially an American intelligence asset. But more importantly, Epstein's network allowed American intelligence to influence domestic policy without leaving fingerprints. Need a Supreme Court justice to rule a certain way? Pressure someone in their network? Need Congress to pass specific legislation? Activate the right compromised members? Need favorable media coverage for an intelligence operation? Use compromised journalists? David explains that Epstein's protection came from the very top of the intelligence community. His 2008 plea deal wasn't a failure of the justice system. It was intelligence agencies protecting a valuable asset. And his 2019 arrest wasn't the result of new evidence or brave prosecutors. It was the result of internal intelligence community conflicts about whether to continue protecting him. The Mossad connection. David then gets into something that really disturbs me, the extent of foreign intelligence involvement in compromising American officials. The Epstein operation was primarily a Mossad operation using American intelligence resources, he explains. Israel needed influence over American policy, particularly regarding Middle East issues. The Epstein network gave them that influence. But here's the key. American intelligence agencies allowed this because it also served American interests. Israel was compromising foreign officials who American intelligence wanted compromised anyway. David shows me documents indicating that information collected by Epstein was shared with both Israeli and American intelligence agencies. It was a win-win arrangement. Israel got influence over American policy, America got influence over foreign officials, and both countries got detailed intelligence on their own domestic leaders. The problem, David notes, is that this arrangement fundamentally corrupted the American political system. How can you have democratic governance when elected officials are being blackmailed by foreign intelligence agencies? The client list cover-up. This brings us to what might be the most important question. Why hasn't the full client list been released? David's answer is chilling, because releasing the client list would reveal the extent to which American government has been compromised by foreign intelligence operations. He estimates that the complete Epstein files contain compromising information on hundreds of current and former government officials, including members of Congress, federal judges, cabinet officials, and senior intelligence officers. The client list isn't just a list of Epstein's customers, David explains. It's a list of American officials who have been subject to foreign intelligence influence operations. Releasing that information wouldn't just destroy individual careers, it would call into question the legitimacy of every decision those officials have made while in office. But here's what really bothers me. The cover-up isn't just about protecting individuals, it's about protecting the system that allowed this compromise to happen in the first place. Supreme Court implications. As David is explaining all this, I start thinking about cases that have come before our court over the past decade, and I realize there are patterns I never noticed before. Cases involving Middle East policy, Israeli interests, intelligence agency authorities. There have been times when court decisions seem to favor outcomes that serve foreign intelligence interests rather than American constitutional principles. David, I say, are you telling me that Supreme Court justices have been compromised by this network? I can't give you names, he replies carefully, but I can tell you that the Epstein files contain information about federal judges at every level, including the highest level. This creates an impossible situation for me as a justice. How can I participate in a system where some of my colleagues might be compromised? How can I trust decisions when I don't know which justices might be subject to blackmail? That's exactly why some people in the intelligence community wanted you to know, David says. There are patriots in the system who believe the American people deserve to know how their government has been corrupted. The ongoing operations. David then tells me something that really terrifies me. The Epstein network didn't end with Epstein's death. Epstein was one node in a larger network, he explains. There are other operations, other assets, other collection sites. Epstein's death was meant to protect the larger network by sacrificing one component. The infrastructure that supported Epstein, the funding mechanisms, the protection systems, the information sharing protocols, that infrastructure is still operational. David shows me evidence that similar operations are ongoing, using different assets but the same basic model. Use compromising situations to collect information on influential Americans, then use that information to influence policy. The people who ran Epstein are still in place, David notes. The intelligence agencies that protected him are still protecting similar operations. The politicians who were compromised are still compromised. The media complicity. I asked David about media coverage of the Epstein case because the lack of serious investigative reporting has always puzzled me. The media silence isn't accidental, he explains. Major news organizations have people in the Epstein network too. Journalists, editors, media executives, they're all subject to the same leverage. David gives me specific examples of stories that were killed, investigations that were terminated, and reporters who were reassigned when they got too close to the intelligence aspects of the case. Moreover, the intelligence community has extensive relationships with major media organizations. When they want a story buried, it gets buried. This explains the remarkable consistency of media coverage. Focus on Epstein as an individual criminal, ignore the intelligence operation aspects, treat it as a law enforcement failure rather than a national security crisis. The congressional theater. David's explanation of congressional oversight is equally disturbing. Congress can't investigate the intelligence aspects of the Epstein case because too many members of Congress are compromised by the case, he says. The few members who aren't compromised are blocked by the members who are, and the intelligence agencies can classify any information that would reveal the scope of the operation. He gives me examples of congressional hearings where questions about intelligence connections were ruled out of order, witnesses who refused to testify about classified matters, and documents that were withheld for national security reasons. It's a perfect protection system, David concludes. The people who should be investigating the operation are the people who have been compromised by the operation. The financial network. David then shows me something that really opens my eyes, the financial infrastructure that supported the Epstein operation. Epstein's wealth wasn't generated through legitimate financial activities, he explains. It was intelligence operation funding disguised as investment returns. The documents David shows me trace money flows from foreign intelligence agencies through a complex network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and legitimate financial institutions. This wasn't just funding for Epstein personally. This was funding for a comprehensive influence operation that included real estate, aircraft, staff, security, and ongoing operational expenses. But here's what really disturbs me. The same financial networks that funded Epstein are funding other influence operations. This is an ongoing system, not a historical event. David estimates that hundreds of millions of dollars annually flow through these networks to fund influence operations against American officials. The technology angle, David explains something I hadn't considered, how modern technology has enhanced these operations. The Epstein operation was relatively primitive compared to what's possible now, he says. digital surveillance, social media manipulation, cyber operations, the tools for compromising and controlling officials have become much more sophisticated. Current operations don't need physical locations like Epstein's properties. They can compromise officials through digital means, financial manipulation, or cyber operations. This means that the problem isn't getting smaller, it's getting larger and more sophisticated. My constitutional dilemma. As I'm absorbing all this information, I realize I'm facing the biggest constitutional crisis of my career. How do I fulfill my oath to uphold the Constitution when the system I'm supposed to uphold has been fundamentally compromised? If other justices have been compromised, how can I trust court decisions? If lower court judges have been compromised, how can I trust the cases that come before us? If the intelligence agencies that brief us have been running operations against us, how can I trust their information? That's exactly the position they want you in, David says, paralyzed by uncertainty, unable to act because you don't know who to trust. But here's what I can tell you. There are people in the system who are fighting this corruption, people who believe in the Constitution more than they believe in institutional protection. The path forward. I asked David, what can be done about this situation? And his answer isn't encouraging. The people who could investigate this are compromised by it. The agencies that should protect against it are running it. The officials who should expose it are afraid of it. But, he continues, there are cracks in the system. Epstein's death created instability in the network. There are intelligence officers who are disgusted by what they've seen. There are officials who want to come forward but need protection. David suggests that the Supreme Court could play a role by demanding transparency in cases involving national security, by questioning intelligence agency authorities, and by protecting whistleblowers who come forward with information. The court has the constitutional authority to demand the truth, he says. The question is whether the court has the courage to use that authority. What this means for America. As I sit here reflecting on this conversation, I realize the implications go far beyond individual corruption or criminal behavior. If David is right, and the evidence he's shown me suggests he is, then American democracy has been systematically subverted by foreign intelligence operations with the complicity of American intelligence agencies. Elections don't matter if elected officials are subject to blackmail. Congressional oversight doesn't matter if Congress members are compromised. Judicial independence doesn't matter if judges are being leveraged. The Epstein case isn't just about one criminal. It's about whether American constitutional government can survive foreign intelligence penetration. Looking forward, David left me with one final thought. The Epstein case is a test of whether America can face the truth about itself. If the system can't investigate and expose this level of corruption, then the system is too compromised to save. As I sit here in my Supreme Court chambers, I realize he's right. This isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein or his network. It's about whether American institutions can maintain their integrity in the face of sophisticated foreign influence operations. The American people deserve to know the truth about how their government has been compromised. They deserve to know which officials have been subject to foreign influence, and they deserve to know what's being done to prevent future operations. But getting that truth requires courage from people in positions of authority. It requires prioritizing constitutional principles over institutional protection. It requires accepting that exposing corruption is more important than maintaining stability. For the choice ahead, I can't unsee what I've learned. I can't pretend that the Epstein case was just a law enforcement failure. I can't participate in a system that protects foreign influence operations while claiming to serve American interests. The question is what to do about it. How does a Supreme Court justice respond when he learns that the system he's sworn to uphold has been systematically corrupted? I don't have easy answers, but I know that silence is complicity, and complicity is a betrayal of the oath I took to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The American people deserve the truth. The question is whether those of us in positions of authority have the courage to give it to them. Thanks for listening, folks. This was the hardest conversation I've ever had to have, but it's one that had to happen. Next week, we'll talk about what constitutional remedies might be available to address foreign influence operations. Until then, keep asking who your government really serves, because the answer might not be what you think